Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Umlink Energy Speaks Back, powered by Heart. My name is Paul Webb. I'm the founder of B2B Energy, and I'm your host. And weekly, I present to you experts from around the world. Welcome to episode 94, and we are again in the UK, but interviewing a lady who travels the African continent to enhance a harmonious climate for business exchange. Our purpose, as always, is to provide a good understanding of energy management knowledge from around the world, which is available today for us to deliver savings that impact on our planet. Our journey of knowledge sharing will always start with us thanking our sponsors, who are Umlink, who are taking the confusion out of energy management, Park Systems, renowned for their energy software, Clean Energy Revolution for their knowledge and networking through LinkedIn, B2B Energy for the 11-week energy program, Alexis Energy for their power management, Led by Vision for their LED and controls, Watts for electronics and EV transition, Carbon Black Global for their waste to energy initiatives, Cinefex for their insulation coating, and SmartCore for their AC initiatives. And I'd like to say welcome to our new sponsors, who are Diadem for their green and blue roof systems. And you'll be hearing more over the coming months. And lastly, our certificate partners, Esther Energy. So today's special guest has been profiled by Forbes Africa, and as the chairwoman and founder of Naha Corporation, she brings contract specialism to the oil and the gas industry. So without any further ado, I give you Arvy, Kaur, Naha.
Good afternoon, Arvy, and how are you today?
I'm really good. I'm really well, Paul. Thanks for asking. All is well.
Brilliant. And are you enjoying this weather currently?
Do you know what? It's been a bit of a hindrance for me in particular, especially with not getting into town. The tubes have been a bit of an issue for us, but trying to enjoy the weather in the garden. So doing my best. Yeah.
It's funny. The UK, and I'll pick on the UK because we're both in the UK currently. We can't cope with the rain. We can't cope with the snow. We definitely can't cope with the summer, but we moan, don't we? We moan if it's too hot. We moan if it's too cold. We're never happy. I'm sure that's across the world as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But I think we've got a tendency to moan about the weather. I think the Brits are known for that. Everywhere you go, everywhere I go all over the world, as soon as you start talking about the weather, that's it.
and then they know you're British.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So you try to kind of sit on the fence on certain subject matters, but weather is always a good conversation starter.
And if you're anything like myself now, any sort of little change in the weather, anything different, straight away my mind goes climate change. This is all a message and that we're getting every day from this. This is definitely a message. This temperature is going right across. Yesterday I got people in Thailand. Our temperatures were higher than Thailand and things, and our evenings are higher than Thailand at the moment. It's right across the globe, isn't it? This temperature.
It is, but I also think I suppose us in the UK, like with a lot of Europe, we're just not prepared for this kind of weather change or climate change. And I think, like you've rightfully said, us in particular. So I heard there was a message that Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, put up, and something like the fire brigade is inundated now with 1,600 calls a day, as opposed to it being 300 calls a day. So I think it's about preparing as well, and preparation of how we cope in certain harsh climates. And I think you're right. I think it's throughout Europe, not just the UK. It's a sign. It's the alarm bells are there. Climate change is with us, and I can only imagine on a yearly basis it will start getting hotter. So maybe homes, especially in the UK, will end up resulting in fitting AC units and things like that. But it's all, it's all a really big sign for us, I think. Yeah,
definitely. Well, Arvy, we've met through my famous area of meeting people through networking through LinkedIn.
Sure.
We obviously had some email correspondence, and I've been begging you to come on to my podcast for months. So thank you for joining us today. So we've had a couple of phone calls, never met in person, but we will be meeting soon, hopefully. And so for the benefit of our audience today, can you give us some of your background and maybe tell us your origin story to why you're here today?
So I'll start right from the beginning as to not to bore anyone, but I started in the oil and gas industry when I was about 19 years old. I took a gap year from studying for my law degree and got a temp job at BP Angola, which were their offices were in Sunbury-on-Thames. And I think during that time, when you're kind of very young, you go through this phase of, not really knowing. Well, I certainly didn't know what direction to go in. Do I want to go ahead? Do I want to qualify to be an attorney? My family have a law firm. So there was great aspirations. My uncle's a fantastic lawyer. And I thought, I want to be just like him. And then what ends up happening is as you start, you kind of think, this is not what I want to do. So I ended up coming back to London and taking a temp job. And it just so happens at that time, globally, BP were actually drilling, I think it was the deepest deep water drilling project in the world, something like 2,200 feet. And I ended up working for a fantastic guy, head of procurement and contracts, a gentleman called John Lindley. And when you're so young, I guess he just took me under his wing and really helped me progress my career. And from then on, really, I decided, we had a chat and he said, look, law is definitely a good base, a good degree to have. He said, why don't you study and work why don't you study part-time and work full-time? And at that age, I think having those kind of people around you and those mentors around you to give you that direction, I think really changes the way you
definitely.
And I think not a lot of people, I think, perhaps have that influence or those mentors in your early career, and then you end up just following and going along the corporate ladder and thinking this is exactly what I want to do. But from then on, I kind of spent 3 years in BP Angola in the contracts team, reviewing contracts, putting together kind of work orders, drafting, negotiation. And that's where my career really started, was there for about a couple of years, then was headhunted to work for another oil and gas company in Ghana. And really spent a lot of my time kind of contracting all over the world, Africa and the Middle East in particular, and really quite life-changing, because at a young age, when you start working in the energy sector, you get, your access to the world is just phenomenal. You anywhere you want to go and work, there'll be a job for you. And I think at a young age, when you're so kind of you're just full of energy, and you're like, yeah, I can go. I was like, anywhere they want to send me, I was like, yep, I'll go.
Brilliant.
So it was fantastic. It was really great. I then ended up moving to West Africa, stayed in Ghana for 3.5, 4 years. I was very fortunate that after I'd finished my contract in Ghana for an oil company, I ended up having my own small alluvial mining business in Obuasi, which was absolutely amazing. I think it's probably the best and the worst thing I've ever done. But it was a really great experience. I was very, what's the right word to use?
Give us some examples why it was the best and worst.
I think it was, I think when you're, and I don't know for everybody, but when you're young and you go for opportunities and you see opportunities, you've got this, I don't think you're as fearful as you are in your late 30s as you are perhaps in your late 20s. Yeah. When it comes to certain risk elements, especially in business, I think. And I think the best experience was that, negotiating with local villagers and the local chiefs as to acquiring some mining land. We took 3 partners from London, my friends and we got a hell of a lot of financing from the UK, and we started mining within about 3 months. Started mining in Ghana from London. So it was, sorry.
Arvy, what was you mining at the time?
I was actually gold mining, so it was alluvial gold mining.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. But you know what? As a novice miner, somebody coming in and I was just excited about what I saw when I was in Ghana. So for me, it was, and we were operating opposite the Chinese government and the Indian government, and these guys had these amazing equipments, and a machine cost them like $300,000, and I think our whole operation
wow,
was very small. And I remember, we were just, we were novice miners. We had no idea what we were doing, let's be honest. But the excitement of it, the thought of it, of just operating and washing the mud and getting granules of gold and running it through to Accra, to PMMC, which is the Precious Mineral Minings Committee. It was fascinating, the whole experience for the whole supply chain of getting an operator to help you with the excavators. It was unbelievable, and it was life-changing.
And would you have rolled your sleeves up and gone down into the mines to?
I did, yeah. I spent a lot of time, yeah. I spent a lot. So it was kind of strange because at that time, kind of alluvial mining and kind of the Obuasi region and Amansi. So it's called the Gold Coast of Ghana. So a majority of kind of the world's global output from gold comes from Ghana. At that given time, there wasn't that much kind of PR or exposure to how you actually conduct alluvial mining. And now looking back, there are fantastic kind of online platforms where you could seek business partnerships, financing and funding. And for us, when we were doing it, none of that was available. So we were always dependent upon, going to friends and private investors. Hey, we need money. We run out of money. Can you help us? But it was just really fascinating. I mined there for about three and a half years. And because of the remote location, we were dependent upon, like these kind of small containers, shipping containers that you get. So we had 2 of those converted into kind of living space for us. Right. And the local town was about 2.5 miles there, and they had a little B&B there. So sometimes when you needed to come out for air, you travel out to go to the town. But majority of the time I was in and out of the bush. And I guess it was a best learning experience for me. You don't take anything when you come back to London. I think you don't take anything for granted. No, because we are so, I think, we're so far disconnected as to how, grassroots level of where your kind of luxury goods come from. We go here, we want to buy something fancy, we want to go to the gold shop, and we just go and we say, oh yeah, I really like that bracelet, I really like that ring. And when you look at the actual supply chain and the actual kind of manual labor that goes into the extraction process, it's you can't really fathom the complexities of it. But it was fantastic. Yeah. So the best and the worst part, I say the worst because it cost me a hell of a lot of money. A great experience, cost us a hell of a lot of money.
You paid for the experience,
yeah. But you kind of, as you rightfully said, you pay for the experience. But it was great, and I think that really catapulted my career into kind of heading into the Middle East, and then working for kind of oil and gas companies as a contractor. Yeah.
Brilliant. So what happened? Okay, we was in energy. We come out of energy, gone into mining. So how did you get back into energy? Back?
It was really interesting. So we, when we had decided that, look, it was costing us a hell of a lot of money so alluvial mining is done in the water. So it's kind of your mud is washed and you get these very large pipes. Now, these pipes are manufactured out in the city, and the supply chain for example, if a pipe gets clogged up, it can take anything from 3 to 6 weeks to go to the operator in Accra for them to get the operator in to come and clean it. So you end up you're always on somebody else's schedule. And the truth of the matter is that one of my biggest buyers was actually a family, a very well-known family in the Middle East. And they they had a base in Ghana for many years. And I told them, and we were just having a conversation, I said, look, I'm done with this. I said, I can't do it. It's more stress than what it's worth. And the conversation with them was like, look, Arvy, you're actually from the oil and energy sector. Congratulations for trying mining, but it's not for you. Why don't you come to the Middle East? And I said, look, and they were actually already in the oil and gas industry, and they were a family firm. And I said, okay, let's do that. So I ended up within the space of, I think it was 9 months of making the decision of I need to leave Ghana. I can't afford it. While we're in the space that we're at, we can break even and give the rest and hand over the rest of the contract over to the Chinese or the Indian government. Will be good. And I ended up going to the Middle East in Dubai at that time. And when I went, to give you an indication, oil was trading at about $110 a barrel. So there was no shortage of money. Finance was available, and projects and oil and gas projects were booming. So I ended
what sort of year was this? What year are we now?
It was about 10 years. About 10 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, about 10 years ago. So it wasn't after the first crash, and it was actually just the peak, just the start of the second oil crash that we had. Right. So it was about 10 years ago. Exactly, I think, yeah. And so we got to the Middle East. I set up this wonderful office, and it was more like a bespoke consultancy office of where we would help kind of market entry for oil and gas companies coming into Africa, because we knew the region very well, how we can help them, support them on contracts and tenders. And it was the most shocking thing I've ever experienced. So we ended up having this wonderful office, and I've got to show you pictures. It was beautiful, and everything was wonderful. We signed an agreement. I remember it was a small engineering contract with the Tanzanian government while we were in the Middle East. And within signing it, and 3 weeks after, the oil had hit $27 a barrel. Wow. And that was it. Everything had to shut down. We lost, and the banks at that time, it was Standard Chartered and Barclays in the Middle East. And they had taken away, with all due respect, they have to do what's right for policy, but they'd taken away all our credit facility as well. So it was a very, very, very tough time, a very difficult time, because all the commitments that you have, and you're not the only one going through it, the whole world is going through it.
Exactly.
So when you're going through something like that, I mean, who do you go to and say, hi, is there any work available? Because the truth is there's no financing available. There's no money. Oil's crashed. Yeah. And those that did manage to survive, I think they did a very good job of it. But a lot of us, we couldn't afford. I mean, for me personally, I remember it was unbelievable. I mean, we couldn't afford to stay in the Middle East. The Middle East at that time was very, very expensive. It just started peaking at its height of kind of business engagement and development. And it was really, really difficult. And we ended up staying in the Middle East for about 18 months. And knowing that I don't think I can stay here. Oil is not going to pick itself up. So then I came back to London. But again, great experience, met some wonderful people, some amazing people walked through the office, because it was a private family office of one of the sheikhs. So we had this fantastic network of people.
Out of interest, what's the barrel rate now? We went down to 27.
So I believe last time I checked, it was 90 something, but there are talks. I've been reviewing some articles from JP Morgan, and they're suggesting that it could go anywhere between 200 and go through the roof in the next 6 to 12 months, they're saying. Right. I know it's just speculation at the moment, but I like to keep myself updated with what really the bankers and those closest to the money are.
And then will that then push gas up? Will we see some significant rises in our gas again?
Absolutely. And I think, the situation that's happening right now and what we're going through right now in the world there's a number of issues. You've got the invasion in Ukraine that's not helping matters. And I don't like to use the word war. It's not really a war, it's a complete invasion. And I think there's, you've got to think about this. It's world, supply chain of foods, some grain. Yeah. I was speaking to somebody at the African Development Bank last week, and I had no idea that I think it's 75 to 80% of all Africa's grain actually comes from Ukraine.
Yeah.
And when you look at statistics like that, I mean, had we not been in this situation, this kind of information wouldn't be readily available to us to read, have that knowledge. But it's affecting supply chain, food, and I think us in the UK, especially in London now, with the rate of inflation, we're feeling it now. I mean, this is normal, working class folk. Even when you go to shopping and you go to the supermarket, it's a small price hikes, and by the time you get, and it will. I think it will end up. I think it's got to get worse before it gets better.
Exactly. And it's not only the grain; it's also, we're surprised to know, it's also copper and cabling.
That's right.
So we're going to see a lot of the construction industry is going to be impacted regarding even steel and things like that. It's surprising how much the Ukraine is a hub of industry for the globe.
But and you're right, Paul. But maybe it's my ignorance. Had we not heard of this invasion and kind of read news that's readily available, I never knew the Ukraine had such a strong footholding globally in the markets. And I think that's perhaps going forward. A lot of the curricula and a lot of the information that we read online should be kind of like heavily supported by news coming out of Europe, because it's not something that I know I wouldn't have known about, my remit is Africa and the Middle East, but I didn't know about the grain situation. It's only something that pops up when you're having conversations about it.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Okay, so we're 10 years away from now. We're on this journey. You've gone back into oil and energy, but obviously the market's hit a bit of a hiccup regarding, because in hindsight it goes up and down, doesn't it? During COVID it went down to zero, didn't it? They couldn't get rid of it.
It was tough. Yeah, it was tough because world was at a standstill, no train, no flight, nothing.
No.
So it's about consumer as well. It's about consumerism and who's spending and where everyone's going.
So what are you doing now? Have we come into now yet, or have we got another 10?
We can come into now as you wish. Are you hurrying me, Paul?
No, I'm not hurrying you. I'm just trying to see where we are. We've got 10 years, haven't we, now to catch up on?
So when I came back from London, I started to, I really sent a very nice email out to all my contacts that I made in the Middle East and said, look, under the circumstances, apologise, won't be able to move forward with any of the contracts. However, when things get better, we'll be in touch. And funnily enough, after about 6 months of sending that, a lot of the very kind of highly influential political players in the African continent got in touch with me and said, look, Arvy, really liked your proposal, liked what you talked to us about. As soon as industry gets better, we'll look at some consultancy work for you. We'll look at some just some to bring you into the fold of what's going on with upstream work. And I was very fortunate. So I was out of work for about, like most of my friends, for about just over 18 months, nearly 2 years when I came back from the Middle East. Then I came back to London and thought, what do I want to do? And I started working as a contractor for a small contracting company here. Well, it was a small American giant here. And I then moved from there back to BP Iraq. And then really just decided that, look, I'm a contractor. I love what I do. I really appreciate it. But I think there comes a time when you've got to have a word with yourself and say, look, do I want to continue just being a contractor? I've got so much worldly experience. I've done so much in such a short space of time. I know some really great people. I need to make something work, And I've met with some really, really wonderful people. I've also met with some very difficult people as well in industry. It's not been smooth sailing. No. And I think that's something that people don't emphasize enough of. It's a very, very challenging industry because you get a lot of kind of power players. You've got a lot of egos in the room.
Of course, yeah.
And it's all. But I guess for me, I've learned to manage that throughout my career. It's not always been easy for me, but I think I've learned. And so now to the current date, I'm here based in London. I have set up a bespoke kind of consultancy firm whereby I support kind of oil and gas private companies in Africa and the Middle East. And recently, not recently, about a year ago, the partners that I had 10, 11 years ago in the Middle East that I had to leave, we've actually set up a freight and logistics company in the Middle East whereby we support the African market from the Middle East. So it's great how things have gone full circle for me. I haven't let go of those relationships, and so I'm very proud of my achievements. It's not been easy, but here we are.
Brilliant. There's lots of things there regarding all your journey, energy, mining, and I just got a sense of Arvy wants to be in control of it. Arvy sort of like driving it. You're a massive driving force within these businesses, aren't you?
I think you know what, Paul? I think we've got to look at it from a very kind of just a characteristic perspective, to be honest with you. I said I kind of like My grandfather from a young age has always played a very key role in my life, and he's self-made, and he brought me up. So as a child, as the oldest grandchild, from a young age, when you're supported by such a strong force, a commercial force, as I would say, of business and how to do things and what we think is right, it's kind of geared me and helped me in what I want to do. And a lot of businesses, Paul, whether we like it or not, it's driven by people with big personalities. It's driven by, I read somewhere recently that people buy people.
Yeah.
If I can't, if I don't get on with you, if I don't have a good vibe with you, I'm not going to want to do business with you.
Exactly.
There has to be some sort of kind of engagement, some sort of comfortability between two people. And I think that, I was brought up in a very kind of working class environment. My friends are from all different cultures, races. And I think once you're in that environment, you know how to cope, you know how to manage going forward.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people, I'm sorry to say, in our industry have got that. They very, they're either come up the ranks and they've very corporate. And when they come to real life situations and scenarios, they fall apart a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's the culture of it. So I come from the CGB. So the CGB is very culturified. It's a government-run organisation. Your manager was the manager, and the boss, like the general manager of the power station. When he walked around, you didn't stand with attention, but you knew he was in. You could feel him in the air, if you know what I mean. And the respect there was unbelievable, And he would always do the walk around just to show who's boss, basically. Yeah. And I like the way you said about, people work with people. And that's when I do my training for energy management, it's the first thing I teach people is like and trust. Because there's no point you being all the best technical person ever. You've got to go and sell them ideas. You've got to go and work with the organization regarding those ideas. And they're not going to buy into those ideas if they don't like you or trust you.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it's got to do with kind of personal self as well, because a lot of people, if you've come from an environment or come from an upbringing where you keep pushing, you keep trying, and it's okay to fail, Yeah. I have friends and their upbringing was really quite different from mine, because if you fail, that was it. If you pack up, you're done. That's it, move on to the next. But for us, it was never really like that. All the times I failed, I remember one time crying. I phoned up my granddad. I was crying in Ghana. First thing he said, sorry, what are you crying about? I said, I don't know, Daddy. I said, he said, sorry, what's the problem? I said, sorry, Daddy, I don't know. And I remember having that conversation with him thinking, Dad, look, this is what's happened. He said, all right, don't worry. He goes, pack things up, do your thing, and come back to London. He goes, but they come from a very different kind of generation.
Yeah.
Of what it means to work hard and kind of make money and develop the family and develop yourself and your grandkids. So it's a very different work ethic as well. It always helps. I've got quite a strong.
It's funny. I've been embraced to that same culture recently. When I'm asked a question and they say to me, it's always, as long as you give an answer, it doesn't matter whether it's a right or the wrong answer. It doesn't matter if you fail. And I really like that culture. Yeah. And I think it's a culture that we need to start embracing, going forward in what we're trying to achieve.
Sure. I think so. And I think depending on what parts of the world you come from, entrepreneurialism is respected at a different level as well.
Yeah, totally.
I think, and I think that in the US, they do it so well. Paul, that they champion kind of entrepreneurialism. There's all these facilities available. There's all these support networks. And you go to London. London's okay. I mean, but it's not. We're still a bit behind the times here when it comes to ups and credit facilities and what the kind of sometimes a support network you need as an entrepreneur as well. It's not quite there. And I think social media has had a lot to do with it in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
But I think we're slowly getting there. I think we've just got a different way of managing that.
So on your LinkedIn, I've seen the word Forbes. So are you a Forbes contributor?
Yes. So about last year sometime, somebody from Forbes Africa reached out. I thought it was a bit of a joke. I didn't take it too seriously. I was like, yeah, okay. I'll see you later. I was like, okay. What is this? And they said, look, we're doing a special issue of Forbes magazine. Could we interview you for your contribution to the African continent?
Wow.
And I was like, wow. I was like, okay. I was incredibly nervous, thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to sell them? And they were very, very diplomatic and very polite about it, and said, look, we just want to share your kind of bio. It's about up and coming people, contribution to local content in Africa, and your scope. And I was very, very fortunate. They ran a one-pager for me with my bio and some questions, Q&As, and it was really quite what's the right word to use? I think it was the first time where you kind of feel like you've reached hiatus, but you're not quite there yet. You're kind of looking at it, but you're not really at the top of the mountain. But it was unbelievable. I mean, it was overwhelming. It was really overwhelming. Everywhere I've gone, people are like, oh my God. And I was like, I know, oh my God. And even though it's just a one-pager in Forbes Africa, I get very, very excited about it. I like to tell
people. That's brilliant. Well done.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks a lot. It's a big deal for me.
What are you? So you're back in the UK. Is that long term, short term?
I'm back in the UK. I've decided to base myself in London for the interim. What I mean by interim is the next 12 months. I still do quite a lot of travel with work, but I think being home in London is it's important for me, I think, as well, because I think when you're traveling so much and doing so much business overseas and kind of interacting, you forget that there's actually quite a big scope in the city and in London as well.
Yeah.
And I've had some great engagements with just some kind of private equity firms here in town, and people that are actually a bit more on the corporate side, kind of Africa focused, mining, energy focused, but a different scope. So private equity, and also kind of ESG development and how people finance projects as well. I mean, the reason why it's fascinating for me is because I remember when I was looking for financing for my project in Ghana, the hurdles and what you have to go through to get financing from banks, they're not interested. They just look at your project plan. Okay, it's very nice. We like it. Okay, see you later. See you next month. And they just shut the door on you. But now, Paul, there are so many facilities available, financing, available for you. And, if you've got a good project plan, these guys and girls in town, they're so astute, so articulate how they actually say to you, look, we can either finance you or give you or we can actually partner with you as a private equity firm would. So there's lots of options for consideration. And as I said to you, this wasn't available 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah. You mentioned the word ESG just then. Is that becoming a bigger part of what what the investment criteria, the tick box, for instance?
It is, and I think that ESG is kind of like, environmental and social governance is, I guess the definition changes depending on what sector you're referring it to.
Right.
So, because I work predominantly in Africa and the Middle East, ESG for me is a very good local content. It's good local content, it's grassroots level development, and then that develops onto the social governance side of things. And I think a lot of corporate companies are doing a really, really good job in kind of implementing ESG into their financial models, their frameworks, and their policies. But again, it can become very, very difficult and challenging when you're actually implementing ESG, because, I mean, between you and I, what's ESG compliant? You have to go through 15 steps of the supply chain. How do you actually know that the piece of wood or the piece of pipeline that you're actually manufacturing or you're using is ESG compliant? So you kind of, there's stages of development here. But I think oil and gas companies in particular, financing companies, are doing really, really well at kind of adopting the fact that, look, we have to be a little bit more compliant with ESG models, understand it a bit better, and also have just a little bit of kind of understanding as to what, when we say ESG, what do we actually mean? I mean, a lot of people just want it's something called greenwashing, where they just greenwash a subject matter. But then you've got some really great firms that actually take it very, very serious, and that's their core scope of work. So there's a lot of that coming in. I'm reading a lot about it as well, which is really good, I think.
We're seeing that. So I do some work for an investment company. I don't get involved in investments. I'm getting involved in their building, their air conditioning, their lighting, etc. And I'm training their staff regarding energy management and what we're doing there. And they want to build that into their ESG. So they are taking it very seriously. And organizations coming to them regarding money transfers, etc., that ESG is playing a big part of that. They're asking lots of questions where there wasn't before. So we are seeing that coming more and more into the environment of financing.
Sure. But I think it's like with anything, when it becomes a prerequisite to financing for a company, the banks and the equity firms and the finance houses have to ask certain questions of their clients.
Yeah.
They have to do their kind of KYC, and in their KYC, understanding a little bit about their kind of
KYC.
Know your client. Get this kind of like, you get this.
So it's like their due diligence as such.
Absolutely, that's exactly what it is. So you get this very, very detailed kind of Excel spreadsheet, and they ask you really questions about absolutely everything. And part of those kind of prerequisite questionnaires are understanding of ESG. How are you going to implement this? What's your framework like? What's your policy like? So I think all of these questions are really a flow down from kind of like the finance houses.
So this is a bit of a curveball question.
Okay.
So you are in the oil industry.
Yeah.
It's not renewable in any way, and it's a form of energy that the world needs. Climate change, obviously, ideally we don't need we need to come away from that because it's not renewable, it's a carbon producer as such. What is you personally and what's the industry doing about that subject of climate change and what we're trying to achieve?
Sure. And I think that's a really good question. And I think over the last kind of 8 years, a lot of oil and gas companies have put great efforts into renewables in particular. And what I mean by that is not just a simple case of putting out a public statement and saying, look, we're going into renewables and these are the plans. It's a complete, for an industry that's worth billions, include trillions, it's going to take a matter of years and many cycles for it to, if the intent is for us to come away from oil and gas as a whole, we also have to make sure that we're set up for the long term. Is the renewable sector, is the hydro, is the wind farm, is this sustainable? Is solar, can it take us to a place where oil and gas can completely be replaced? And I think with all of these things, it will take a cycle of about at least 10, 15 years. And that means continuous work on it. It's not as simple as saying, for our oil and gas industry, it covers everything, covers infrastructure, covers civils work, construction, logistics, so it's a very kind of sensitive subject as well. Because a part of me feels that, we understand what oil and gas companies do. We totally get that subject matter. But saying to somebody, and I've had a conversation with some really great climate change people, I said, bear with us, come and work with us. We totally get
exactly.
What but saying that it should be done immediately, that's totally unrealistic. Any transition takes time, but as I said before, it would just take time. But efforts have been made, believe you me, and it's not easy. I mean, can you imagine like all these giants, BP, Shell, all these big IOCs, to do a complete transition, it will cost hundreds of millions, but it does take time, and they've done a very, very good job with it, to be honest.
And it's not the difference of them just changing their mission statements. It's an amazing change that they've got to go through. And
absolutely.
Again, something you said there about, be patient with us, work with us, collaborate. I think what I see, especially on LinkedIn, is someone will put up something about renewables and there's someone from the gas and oil industry will attack it, and you'll see this battle going on just through LinkedIn. And you see that on a regular basis. But we need to push all that to one side and work together. We are seeing a lot of people transition from the gas and oil into renewables, which I think is a good thing because that's got so much technology and skills in there. We need to bring that into this industry. And we need to see it going back, but we need the two coming together, don't we, for it to achieve?
Yeah, but I think that's like, I mean, sometimes people get very, it's a very passionate, people get very passionate about the subject matter. And it's again, I think that certain conversations need to be had with certain people as well. That I think that, as well as it's okay to be a climate warrior and go and say your piece, I understand that. But if what you're doing is causing chaos on the M25,
Exactly.
if what you're doing is barricading yourself to a very fancy Mayfair hotel, that's just gonna frustrate the general public and the subject matter. Why don't you come together? Let's talk about it. Let's have some sort of kind of diplomacy and kind of understanding as to how we talk about this and how we get over this as well. Because oil and gas companies, I mean, it's a very difficult, as I said before, it's a really tough subject matter. Because not everybody feels the same way.
You made me smile because I was cleaning one of my drawers out, doing a bit of decluttering, as it's the fashion at the moment. And in one of my drawers, I found some super glue, and I thought, where could I go and stick myself to this afternoon?
Well, it was fascinating.
And create some chaos.
Yeah, it was fascinating. There was a really big a summit going on in Mayfair, and it was very early in the morning. I usually get to the office at about 7, and about 7:30, police cars just off Berkeley Square. And as I walked out, it was unbelievable. They had handcuffed themselves to two of the 5-star hotels, some shops, and the whole of, you can imagine the chaos. And I think the point was made. I think they made a good point, and I said, great, it was on the news and everybody wanted to hear about it. But I think there could be a better way we challenge, we make kind of provisions for these kind of challenges. I think it's difficult.
People becoming extremists, don't they? I'm ex-nuclear power,
right? Okay.
And I used to drive through protesters on a regular basis.
Oh God, right?
From working. And that's one of my trigger points regarding why I sort of changed my career as such. But to see the protesters, they were extremists. They used to let off black balloons everywhere and then sirens, and then all throw themselves on the floor as if there was a nuclear release as such. And
sure.
It's just extremist, isn't it? And there always will be that type of protest going on.
Yeah, but we're very fortunate that again, we're very fortunate that we're in the UK. We're in London, whereby we are a kind of democratic. Well, I've got to be careful here without getting politically affiliated, but I think
I don't allow politics in my talk, but we do find ourselves.
I'll keep that for another time. But what I'm trying to say is,
no, use it up. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So, Arvy, let's come to that stage in the podcast where I'm looking for yourself to give something back to the industry.
Okay.
Is there anything that you can give back as a takeaway for our listeners today?
Look, I think I'd like to share some subsectors of what I've learned and kind of like equality and what I think is important for industry now. And I think that the challenges are still in the workplace, in the corporate world for the oil and energy sector when it comes to equality, and in certain parts of the world as well, having kind of a strong kind of female board presence is very, very important going forward. And then what I mean is I'm not here to kind of, what's the right word to use? I'm not here to cause any issues and champion. No. But I think it's very important that having a diversified kind of board and presence in team meetings is really, really important for industry to really excel. And we live in London. As far as I'm concerned, London's the capital of the world, but it's still not as kind of progressive as I would like it to be. But things are being done, changes are being made. So I would just say for those that are in the corporate environment, just share knowledge, just share insights with people that you're not used to seeing all the time. There may be people that come from a total different background to you, but if you start a conversation with them, you don't quite know what your interests will be. And so I think, look, it's just about engagement for me. It's really important. I'd like to share a lot more of that with people from my industry. And I encourage everybody else to do it as well.
Brilliant. Well, you're going to come and meet me again on my soapbox, where you can really stand up.
Okay.
You can be political if you want.
Okay.
On the soapbox, because that's what it's all about.
I'll have to put the lawyers on standby then.
So it doesn't matter.
No, not really. So it's very difficult, because I feel like sometimes I've got a lot of friends actually that have made public statements, and they've actually been criticised thereafter. So I've always been really careful as to what I think it's important what you say as well, especially if it's going out to a large audience. So,
exactly. Arvy, it's been amazing having you on. Thank you for joining us on today's call. It's been, I know I've been pushing you for many, many months to come on, but it's really great to see you. And I'd just like to say to you now, lastly, you and your family stay safe in these times.
Yeah, no, appreciate the opportunity, Paul. Thank you very much. Look forward to catching up with you soon. Thank you.